Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. We are going to talk about 5 strategies to turn an internship into a career in search marketing. I'm Kent Lewis. You can find me on the Twitter at Kent J. Lewis. And my day job is president of Anvil Media. You can find us on Twitter there. And also, I founded pdxMindShare back in roughly 1999. And hopefully, you're following us on pdxMindShare on the Twitter. A few pieces of housekeeping first. Make sure that you mute yourself so your typing and eating are not there for everybody to hear. And that reminder there will be a Q&A at the end of this session. When you do your chat Q&A, make sure you select chat for everyone so all folks participating can see the chat questions. And we will post the presentation by the shortly after, in the next day or two, on SlideShare and YouTube for the pdxMindShare profiles. But we will be emailing a copy of this presentation shortly afterwards. Be sure to sign up for the pdxMindShare weekly email newsletter on our website, pdxmindshare.com, and join our LinkedIn group, which is Portland's and Oregon's largest group on LinkedIn. So with that said, let's get started. All right. So, a few details, a few more, I guess, high-level details. You can let us know through chat you want a copy, but we'll pretty much email anybody that RSVP'd. And you can, of course, reach me through chat or through, at the end of the conversation, I can get you my information if you're interested. So today we're going to talk about, the title was 5 career strategies. It's really going to be a lot more than that because I can't stretch 5 strategies 50 minutes. But I can give you more like 5 plus 5, 10 plus 10. So we're getting 30 tips and lessons plus 6 steps to rewarding career. It's going to be action-packed. You're going to really love it. If you don't, you got what you paid for. So of the 10 strategies to turn an internship into a successful career, frankly, in anything, but obviously the focus today is on search marketing, there are a couple tips. So number 1 is do your research, right? So when I talk to folks informationally or for a formal interview, I suggest that they do a little bit of work to research the industry first, understand the discipline and what that all entails. I think it's important to keep that in mind. Who are some of the key players? When you're meeting with an individual or some sort of an employee or an executive or HR manager at a company, make sure you review the entire website, at least all the salient points, so you understand what that company does, who they are, and you get a sense so that the questions you ask are smart and not like, what do you guys do again? It's a great way not to get a job, even an internship. It helps to read the news coverage, reviews, other recognition to kind of get a sense and triangulate how well respected the organization is. I would say from personal experience, keep Glassdoor reviews I would read with a grain of salt and a bit of mirth. Yelp reviews are similar for retail, but looking at what clients are saying I think is very helpful in the agency world. And then research the executive team, hiring managers, get a sense for who's who and know a bit about them. So I think it makes a lot of sense when you're able to ask smart questions of the executives when you're meeting with them, or if you're meeting with a lower level manager. I read this so-and-so about Kent and wondered if, what your thoughts were on that article or that speaking gig or that coverage. It just shows you did your homework. Lastly, request additional information on the hiring process. If you do it smartly, it can be well respected. If you do it poorly, it sounds like you're trying to ruffle some feathers. But the idea is let them know you understand there should be a hiring process, so you can understand and set expectations. Know the difference between an informational interview, which there is no expectation of a hiring or a formal review process. But if it is a formal review process for an internship or otherwise, make sure you understand what the next steps are and clear that up front. You can see, for instance, to do homework on the Anvil site would be to go to our Insights section, which has tons of marketing resources. If you have enough time in the day, you can basically learn everything that we do at Anvil at a very high level and look pretty smart about it coming right in the door. And so even if bonus points, you're able to share a point of view about what you like and what interests you most about a career in marketing, digital specific to us, that's good to know. Next up would be to know your place. Again, I will say, caveat, that some of these recommendations came out of a recent internship that did not go perfectly well. I even sat down with this person and gave them advice, and they lasted maybe another week, and it wasn't a good fit. So a lot of these 10 lessons I'm sharing were based almost entirely on that one person's experience. So one thing that I would start with, and I didn't do a great job of this on my first internship, was understand management's expectations of me, or the team's expectations. I went in hard charging after graduating, and I was at a large agency as a PR intern, and I should have sat down and asked, what do you expect of me, beyond this job description? I just kind of did my own thing and ruffled a few feathers along the way. And if I just asked that question up front, I probably could have saved myself some pain and that for a few other folks. I should have reviewed that job description, gained any clarity, answered questions, or asked questions so I had confirmation and understanding. It is helpful. You say, there's the old movie in the 80s, 9 to 5 with Lily Tomlin and so forth. And, it's kind of a metaphor when somebody says we're, 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 4:30. Understand that is a rough, that's a rough framework that as a new employee or an intern, you want to know exactly when you should be there by. And then best practice is to show up a few minutes early and leave a few minutes later, but always be available. Know where you're sitting, know how the parking works. Typically, interns don't get a stipend for parking or transportation. That's the low-level, entry-level cost of getting into a career. If you're going to ask, be smart about it. Sometimes it's good to check with other employees first to say, hey, do you guys get parking? Is that a thing? Would I get parking? Should I ask? It would be more appropriate to ask up front before you start or during that first day than later on when it seems a little awkward. And then ask for training on, general things like workflow. So not just where you sit and what you do, but how you get it done, what tools you might need. And part of that initial conversation beyond setting expectations is defining what success looks like. Talk with your manager and say, what is that headline? What is that opening when you're proud of me at our, 30, 60, 90-day review? What is going to be that winning statement where you know and I know that we've nailed it? So, for example, as a little screenshot of the responsibilities for an internship at Anvil, you get a sense of roughly what the responsibilities are, activities, and some of the platforms. Every internship or job description should outline something similar. Next up, follow the lead. So understanding the company rules and protocols. So beyond your day-to-day, how does the organization work as a whole? So how do you request time off? If you want to leave early, who do you talk to? Typically your hiring manager. Do they expect you to make up time if you leave early or cut some corners for another engagement? So generally, what are the protocols? At Anvil, we have an Anvil 101 doc that is an accompaniment to our handbook. And the idea there is that there are certain things like vernacular. We have a bunch of abbreviations in our nomenclature that are explained for somebody who comes in and has no idea what kind of jive we're talking. So that's different than the legal policies and procedures of a handbook. This is more like a indoctrination document, and typically new employees continually update the document so it's timely. So I'd ask if the employer has some sort of orientation documentation or training. It's good to gain insights into the company culture. A lot of that can be found for many companies on places like Instagram or Facebook. If they're active socially, you can get a sense for, do they drink? What time do they start drinking? Do they drink every day at noon or only on Fridays or never? And just generally dress code, that sort of thing is good to get a clean understanding of up front. Even things like swearing or other references. And I will say that, interestingly, the agency culture in general is far more relaxed than a corporate culture when you work in-house in a corporate marketing department. But, my recommendation, as I do with prospective clients, is always dress 1 degree nicer than the people you're meeting with. So if you're an intern, start with a suit, then you drop the tie, then you drop the jacket, then pretty soon, by the end of your internship, you're in shorts and culottes, t-shirt and culottes. So work your way down, but do it, consciously. Know when to ask questions and who to ask. So certain questions are typically best answered by the manager, but when it's culture and more subtle things that are around, just being a good employee, sometimes it's good to ask a more seasoned intern or junior employee that's not going to be offended by you asking because they recently went through that experience themselves. But mimicking, watching and learning, I think is very important. What are they doing? How is it working? And then when in doubt, it's not always good to just stumble through things and make mistakes. It's always good to ask. There are no stupid questions, just stupid people asking questions. That's my rule of thumb. Tip number 4, strategy 4, is to know your audience. So research and understand your direct manager's interests, hobbies, mostly their communication preference. Are they email-based? Are they face-to-face? Get a sense for and build rapport with that person based on, their likes, dislikes, and so forth. You'll be far better working with somebody like me through email or being direct and to the point in person. Other people like to sit and get to know you first, or they prefer GChat or Slack or some other platform. So get to know communication preferences and styles, and also connect with the rest of the team there. Especially if it's a smaller team, say under 20 people, you should make a point of in the next, every other day or two, grab a coffee with some of those folks. Now, if you were to buy coffee for everybody, you might not be in the financial situation to do that. So just go to Coffee Go Dutch, or maybe they offer because they feel bad for you because you're a lowly intern. But I would always offer to buy because that free information you can get is well worth it, and you build rapport quickly. I would also identify and engage with influencers within the company. Know who those are that get things done. What Malcolm Gladwell calls the gatekeepers, and understand the personality, motivations, and goals of pretty much everybody. The other element is to manage perceptions. I would say that my first job was my first real job outside of my internship when I moved to Portland. I was the first electronically based employee, so I did not use all the paperwork and documentation and booklets that everybody else did, so they thought I was absolutely not busy, when in fact I was one of the most billable people in the shop. So I had to manage perception, so I did that by carrying around a folder full of blank paper for about 2 or 3 weeks until one of my indirect managers said, "Wow, you look really busy." I put a bunch of papers and booklets on my desk to look busy. That's ridiculous. That means the manager manages on perception, so I just played that game. It's better just to have good communications so you don't have to manage the BS aspects. You see a bunch of my social profiles below. Again, one way to triangulate. Check out my profiles on social, follow me, get a feel for what I'm posting, be able to ask smart questions. I saw you posted this, or I read that article about you, or your recent coverage in the Herald Tribune. That's all good stuff. I had a question about that coverage. What's your take on this? Those are ways to build rapport with, managers and coworkers. Strategy 5 is to be humble. You understand that, you basically are the lowest rung as an intern, and just embrace it. You come in humbly. You're there to earn respect. You don't come in with any respect. This is boot camp. Think of it as military boot camp training. You're there to learn. You're there to listen. So you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So it should be about 70% listening, 30% talking. Don't expect to be an equal. Earn that status. Offer help. Offer solutions. Be there at any time of day. To be available, be timely, attentive. Also be generous with your time. You can see our Google reps came in and brought us Blue Star donuts. They learned. They originally brought us Voodoo donuts, and if you're from Portland, you think those are a joke. But Blue Star is legit. Any donut that's $3 a pop is, in this case, they are legit, but they are ungodly expensive. They do have a layaway plan, I believe. So anyway, if you were to bring in a dozen donuts on your first day, that bribery absolutely works. The stomach is the fastest way through the brain, oftentimes. Strategy 6, get it right the first time. So, what I'm saying here is you can lean in as best you can just do your best, right? And so when you show your coworkers and the managers that you've done your best and you do it all the time, then that's the right thing. It may predate some of my listeners, but Henry Kissinger was a famous diplomat and politician under Nixon, and what he would do is ask his lowly people to provide a report, and without looking at it, he'd sit on it for an hour or two, then he'd hand it back and say, "Is this your best work?" And they'd say, "No," and he said, "I want to see your best work." He'd do that 2 or 3 more times before he even read the report. You could say that's kind of a jerk move, but I would say it got better work out of them, and they learned to give it their best effort the first time around. So then when they say, "Yeah, that is my best work," then he'd read it. You want to meet or exceed, beat any deadlines when possible. Learn from your failures, but I want to see a steeper learning curve. You know, shame on you, then shame on me, right? And learn from the mistakes of others. It's a lot cheaper than learning from your own mistakes. So anyway, I share my painful learnings. When I was on a trip, and then I had a back-to-back trip, 4-hour. I arrived at 1 a.m. back to my house, and I had to leave at 5 a.m. for a flight. And it was over the weekend of daylight savings. I missed my flight. I set my alarm, but I hadn't adjusted my clock. So I wanted to share that lesson with everybody so that maybe fewer people would miss flights over daylight savings. So strategies to pay your dues. I hate to say this, millennials and Gen Zers, but you are not special. You don't know shit. Coming out of school, you have a very expensive, or if you're lucky, a scholarship education. Or maybe you didn't go to college, went to community college, or maybe you didn't go to school at all. Doesn't matter. The more expensive educations aren't necessarily any better, especially if you're an agency. We don't care. I don't care about your GPA. I'm mildly interested in what classes you took, but mostly I'm interested in what have you learned and why are you interested in being here and starting a career in digital. And so I was very humbled when I started my career, and the first newsletter I wrote for the company, 125 employee company, the PR person that was my manager redlined every word but 2. So it was a full page of red marks, and after getting an A in college English, I thought I was the bomb. And writing for creative English versus AP style press writing is very different, so I had to learn the hard way. Try to demonstrate some value and commitment before making any major ask. You know, on your first day, don't ask for vacation time off if you can avoid that. Try and do that earlier on or far later on. Build a compelling case. So I wanted to go tell my boss when I was making all of $14,000 in my first PR job. I felt I was worth more, and I told my friends that work there, "Hey, I'm going to go and ask for more money." They're like, "Well, are you going to make a case?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Do the numbers." So I figured out how much I was billing, which was about $140,000, which was more than a 10x return. And so I went in and said, I'm the most profitable person here, and I think a little bump would be fair, and they gave me a bump on the spot. So suddenly I was a baller at $17,000. So we pay a little bit more than that now at Anvil, thankfully. Be patient. This is theoretically a 40-year journey unless you, A, bought a bunch of Google or Facebook stock really early on, or Apple stock 20 years ago, or you win the lottery, or you marry well. Otherwise, you're going to have a fairly long career, so be patient. And be careful when job hopping. I had my first 10 years, I had 10 jobs. That was still seen as viable because I was moving up the ladder and taking on greater responsibilities and showing the performance. But when we see a resume with 5 jobs in 5 years, that's a huge red flag. So if you're doing it for the money, it can backfire. You may not actually get ahead at the end of the day. Be careful. And then secondarily, I would say, if you aren't happy somewhere, I would always recommend talking to your manager to let them know, to give them a chance to fix it before you immediately leave. I've seen that far too many times, very fixable things, and people have already committed to leave. It's expensive for everybody when people move along, but happiness obviously is very important. Strategy 8, fail fast, apologize faster. So you will make mistakes, but own them fully and quickly. That's very hard for people, some people, and occasionally me even, to own mistakes. I've found that when I do, even if I'm not pretty sure that wasn't my fault, when I own it, it really makes everybody feel better. Thanks for owning that. Let's move on. when I've done that, it gets a much better response, and I feel better about it too. It kind of gets it over with. Then you can then figure out how to move from there. Share what you've learned and how you've grown. So, I made this mistake. Here's what I did to make sure it doesn't happen again. Here's how I made good, and here's how I've grown. Managers definitely want to hear that. And then help others by documenting your lessons. So that's why I write blog posts and do webinars sharing my experience, whether it was my personal experience as an intern or an amalgam of many interns plus the most recent intern, in this case for this webinar. And as I only alluded to briefly earlier, be prepared to make good. So what can I do to make this up, make this right? I think that's always a good thing to do. So with my Jerry Maguire article, Portland Business Journal, it outlines kind of what I had done wrong in the first article. When they wrote the sequel, they were much harder on me, and that was the last time I talked to the Portland Business Journal many years ago. But the idea was, is he learning from his lessons? So I would say absolutely, and it's been a long journey to get back there, but I'm happy to transparently share those lessons. So strategy 9, own your experience. So you get out what you put in. You don't put in much in your internship, you're not going to get much out of it. You're also probably not going to get a job out of it. Ask for feedback and advice regularly. My first internship, my mom suggested I put a survey together, and I handed it out to the team I worked with. And there were these 3 gals that were very cliquish, and they wrote exactly the same thing. Probably sat around over lunch, and it was very insulting and thoughtless, and it really bummed me out. But one of the gals who I got to know, I sat next to, she was like, I didn't fill out your survey, but here's 2 pages of feedback. And it was kind of career-changing insights. It was very helpful for me in my career. So ask for that feedback. It can be very helpful. Share your wins with management. I've had employees say, well, you never gave me kudos. And then I say, well, if I don't know about something, how am I supposed to congratulate you for achieving it? So, so you're either the kind that doesn't care about getting the kudos, or you are. And if you are, you've got to share those wins, comments from clients, comments from coworkers. You're not being a brown noser when you're just sharing and informing your management, especially if they agree that they want that information to celebrate it. That's part of our culture at Anvil, is to give out kudos regularly, but meaningfully. And again, I mentioned it earlier, share your lessons with others. Maybe it's a personal blog is a great place to do that. And look for building lasting relationships. So the idea there is that some of my best friends I met at my first job in Portland when I knew nobody else in this town back in '95, I invested that time, and it was definitely worthwhile. And then our 10th strategy, learn valuable life lessons as well. So be prepared to put in the extra hours. I've found that the most valuable time I ever got out of my previous jobs and my current role at Anvil was those after hours, extra hours. I remember we pulled an all-nighter at my first job here in Portland to prepare an important deck for a big event. And I mean, I think I got home at like 3, slept for a couple hours, and came back. And it was like, that was the best bonding. It was the most fun. It was exhausting. There are other agencies like in town that, I don't know, a W and a K works with Nike, that I've had friends pull 6 months straight, no days off. I've had them pull many all-nighters. That's just the expectation that certain agencies and certain cultures are like that. That's not how we are at Anvil. Never pulled an all-nighter at Anvil. Goal is to not have to do that. But the bonding we've had in some of the odd hours and after hours has been some of the best. Look for ways to improve everything you touch. So I have this kind of 3-month rule that learn a company, learn the processes, even if immediately like this seems wrong, is bite your tongue until you understand why it works the way it does, which requires some familiarity, before you make recommendations on how to change things. And then that will be much more warmly received. Show the team you care, be thoughtful, spend the time to get to know the team, as I mentioned, but be thoughtful in knowing when people seem to be struggling and go in and offer to help them out. And get to know folks personally in the real world. What are their interests and hobbies? Does it make sense to hang out with people outside of work? It often does. And then set goals and build a roadmap to achieve them. So back in the late 90s, I set some 1-year, 2-year, 5-year, 10-year goals. Some of them were ostentatious and ridiculous. And within those timelines, if not sooner, I basically achieved them all, even though they seemed radical. And, you know, early in my career was very sort of checkbox monetary, a little bit of status, a house, a car, whatever. And then later in life, it's more the intangibles like freedom and flexibility and experiences. So whatever is important to you, but if you don't write down your goals and look at them regularly, you'll never achieve them. So you can see some of the activities we do on the bonding side. We have a lot of Nerf wars. We do some drinking games, which you're not going to see at very often in non-agency world. That's just part of who we are. May or may not be right for you. But let's shift a little bit, and I thought we'd take a nice little sponsored break and say, hey, what do marketers do? Because I get that question a lot. I was at a career fair at Oregon State University a couple weeks ago, and the questions are like, so what does an average day look like? And so I wrote an article, of course, how marketers spend their time for iMedia, and I made up this fake chart. It's scheduling meetings and attending meetings 100% of the time. And that's kind of a joke, but it's kind of true, especially the bigger the companies, the more meetings you typically have to have. And that's typically how it works. But the real answer, I did some research and I asked a few friends, what are the best and worst aspects of a marketing job and how you fill your time? Everybody agreed meetings are the thing that is the largest time waster or time suck. And then Molly here spends a lot of time writing and editing and doing social, whereas Jeremy, a former employee and client of ours, his frustration with ineffective emails and lengthy or poorly formatted emails so meetings and emails are difficult. And then our friend Gina was saying, just constantly responding to emails, checking emails, sitting in meetings, managing partners, vendors. So typically, the more seasoned you are, the more work you do after hours. My day is full of meetings, so I typically have to get actual work done after hours, after the kids go to bed. I wouldn't worry about that as an intern, but that's kind of where it goes. And a few other thoughts and stats. So 85% of marketers log in on weekends to keep up with their work, so just know that expectation, especially the more seasoned you are or senior. Average marketer spends almost a third of their time completing repetitive tasks. What that tells me is it's partially unavoidable, but there may be ways to streamline or automate some of those repetitive tasks. So be looking for ways to do that. And then strategy and planning, along with design content, takes up a majority of the marketer's time, particularly around building campaigns. So that's not everybody's job all the time, but that's a lot of what happens there. Daily breakdown of time, it typically starts, the biggest part of the job is performing the primary duties of the job. So if you're a social media person, only a third of your time is spent doing social media. Then there's that intrepid sending and responding and sorting emails, administrative non-billable tasks. Then there's the useful or productive meetings, only 12% of the time, but the rest of the time is pretty much wasteful meetings and interruptions. So that's people coming up and asking you about Janus and the TPS reports. So be prepared for that interruption time is going to happen, or manage it more proactively. So in the world of discipline, in research from HubSpot, a lot of folks in the digital world, the most routine tasks are around collecting and analyzing data, managing email landing pages, managing social, and lastly, email list or database management. So that's kind of what digital marketers are doing today. But what's getting in the way most of the time? It is wasteful meetings with a fairly long shot, and then excessive emails. So the BCCs, the CCLs, the quick responses. I have an issue, OCD. I have to say thank you. I have the last email, and that probably bugs my team to no end. But I feel like then I've acknowledged that we're good. May not be for everybody. Excessive oversight, so micromanaging. I'm terrible at micromanaging, which is probably a good thing for my team. Standard processes and workflow, if they don't exist, you're wasting time. Unexpected interruptions, of course, are down the way. So these are the things that are going to get in the way that you have to be ready for as you build your career in marketing. So with that, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about providing some measurement career lessons. So I have 20 of them. And these are basically, I'll talk through them quickly, but these are lessons after 20 plus years of being in digital marketing, and maybe I can impart some knowledge and help you out in your career. So number one, I talked about managing perception, and it's a real thing that eventually perception becomes reality. So, I had our creative director at an agency 12 plus years ago, 15 years, actually, God, it had to be almost 20 years ago. I guess back in 2002, he would play Miss Pac-Man tabletop at certain times of the day with his coffee mug near him that interestingly never had any coffee in it, but always had a clear liquid that was not water. Anyway, perception was he was a drunk, video game addict. But in between those times when you saw him out and about, he actually created brilliant copy. It was just kind of a sad story that the perception kind of outweighed, and then people stop giving you as much work because they think you can't handle it, et cetera. So be very careful how you manage perception. So in my internship, when I was making very little money here in Portland initially, I saw it said 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or whatever, so I always got there on the nose and left on the nose, and then my friends kind of guided me who'd been in the world a little bit longer than me, said, that's the indicated time, but you're probably going to want to put in more hours if you want to get ahead. So I figured out that I'd show up 5 minutes before the boss got there and leave 5 minutes after the boss got there, and suddenly I was a high performer. So perception is everything. Stay close to the money. In the world of PR, we were 2 degrees from the money. I would pitch the press about my client. The consumer would read about the client in that publication. Then they would go to the client and give them money, and then the client would give us money, thanks for that coverage. But we were still far away from that transaction by at least a degree or two. And then when I started optimizing websites in '96, then suddenly my clients were like, where's that report? I need to know how much traffic did we get? Back then it wasn't even conversions, it was just traffic. And not even unique visitors, literally hits to your website, which is really, really remedial metric, but that's what it was. And suddenly I realized that one of my clients, their board meetings always started with their traffic reports. So suddenly I was right there on top of the money, and it never really stopped. And then I realized on the converse side was the more that I measured, the more I was getting managed. So in the first 5 to 10 years of my career, my clients didn't know what the hell I was doing. They just know they needed what we had. And then there was that was fun because I could give them whatever remedial reports and they were grateful for it. Then as clients got more sophisticated, they started asking for more information. The more they were like, well, we lost 3 positions for this keyword. What does that mean? And I'm like, not much. It fluctuates. So we try this for the last 10 years. We've been focusing on our clients' attention on conversion rates, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what position you rank if you're not generating clicks. It doesn't matter how many clicks you generate if you're not generating conversions. So at the end of the day, know what you're measuring will get managed, and that can be a very good thing. But not if you're not measuring what matters. So again, and tip number 4 is we focus on the conversions, the last mile, and then reverse engineer the rest. The rest of that data is supportive data. And we've had big, sophisticated clients only care about rankings for certain keywords rather than the resulting conversions on their site, and that's very frustrating. It's good to visualize the data. I'm visually oriented, so you can give me a spreadsheet and I can promptly ignore it with absolute skill. What I need to see is the actual data visualized in charts and graphs. Clients are often that way. The higher up the ladder you get, more likely that they prefer charts and graphs because they just don't have the time to pore over spreadsheets. I've been burned by not having clearly defined goals and metrics with certain clients in the past. Maybe it was a handshake, maybe I knew them too well, or maybe I was too afraid to ask, and I end up paying a price. Clients leave when they're like, you never achieved our goals, and then realize they never told us what their goals were because we never asked. Measuring the past should inform the future. It doesn't always, but it's helpful. So if you're not measuring now, how are you going to make improvements based on that data? And as best you can, when there's real-time data, act on it. There's no point in having real-time data if you're not acting on it. So Google Analytics has real-time data. Not very many clients act on that, but if they do, it can be powerful. And for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been telling my clients and my team predictive analytics are the future. So utilizing algorithms and machine learning and artificial intelligence to determine what people will be doing. So if you can get in on analytics, particularly on predictive analytics and AI, you've got a bright future ahead. And the difference between good analytics and great analytics is those that are good with data see the stories being told within the data. So it's more like an art and not just a science. It's a combination of the two. 10 more lessons before we have two more sections before we wrap up with Q&A. So relational data creates context. So I can say I went from 2,000 likes on Facebook to 20,000 likes on Facebook, but the relational data I like when comparing that would be, well, did your likes or other engagement metrics hold steady as you increased your follower base or as you increase your rankings, are you increasing your revenue? So tie two numbers together relation-wise to make sure you're pacing the proper direction. I always look at competitors. So if I have a client or if I'm trying to get things done internally, typically appealing to the decision makers with competitive data, appeals to ego and can get things done. Most common problem I see with technology-related clients or product-related clients is that they are all about speeds and feeds, feature advantage benefit. Here are all the facts, but they're not telling a story. So great brands tell great stories, and that's what sells. And your data should create some sort of actionable insights. Far too many years I've instructed my team, particularly in the past and previous entities, that end-of-month reports about digital marketing are not copy-paste charts with very obvious observations. It's here's what this data really means, and peeling through the data and looking for trends and opportunities, insights, in other words, that can actually move the business forward rather than copy-paste monkey work. And then inspect, do not expect. So I mentioned I don't micromanage. The lesson I learned was I try to hire the best people I can afford. They're hopefully smarter than me. And then I just was expecting they'd rock it, and I wasn't inspecting their progress. And they got to a point where either they were failing or thought they would fail. It was easier to leave than to fix it. And I didn't see that coming because I was not inspecting. So always inspect, do not expect. And don't let good numbers create complacency. So for many years ago, when the numbers were positive and compelling, there was no reason for me to look under the hood, and that's exactly when I should have been looking under the hood because the numbers were almost too good. And so I thought I don't need to change anything, and then I ended up rebuilding the entire company in 2013. After a couple of years of good money, I realized we were running right off a cliff. We weren't keeping up with what was going on in our changing industry. And also, don't worry. We just had a client today talk about, hey, there's this new AI, artificial intelligence marketing person you can basically hire that's a computer, it's a chat bot, it's a AI tool, and it'll do all your bid management for you. And I think we're a long ways away from the Skynet from Terminator. There's always a place for humans to do deeper research, to garner insights. Some of the ongoing bid management, sure, it can be automated, but that's been the case for over a decade. And if you map your analytics to your dream job, you can connect those two and be very successful. So what gets measured gets managed. Measure what matters. If you're on top of the data, data is power, data is knowledge. And I mentioned before, set your goals. So you might as well create your own career dashboard, build a plan, build a dashboard, set goals, set timelines. But most of all, you got to start your journey today. So start building out your goals and go from there. So I have very quickly, backing it up a little bit, I wrote an article, 6 Steps to Developing a Rewarding Career. And the idea, and some of these are hyperlinks to more information, I meet with a lot of people through MindShare that are mid-career change, 7-year itch, 20-year itch, 40, your midlife crisis sort of thing. So I developed this article based on a bunch of learning from entrepreneur organization of which I'm a member. A bunch of business owners around the world get together and try and learn from each other. And so what I've learned is that over the years, 20 plus years of hiring people, if you don't inherently have a passion for what we do in the digital dark arts in marketing, then it's probably a lost cause. I can't create your passion. I can only ignite and fuel it and direct it. So if you don't know who you are and what fires you up, what gets you up in the morning, what you're interested in doing all day, then you're going to be job hopping, and that's expensive for both of you and the employer. So try and really figure out what is it about my day-to-day. If you haven't graduated yet, you can pull from your college experience. You can pull from summer jobs or other experience. What am I really most interested in? And that's kind of a bit of your who. But that's a little different than determining your purpose in life or your mission, which is your why. So that is, what is my reason for being? And how do I tie that to my career? So Simon Sinek wrote a book and a bunch of resources on the why. I encourage you to click through and read that. And then figure out where you want to go. What is the end game? Do you want to retire at 30, like most Portlanders, or do you want to retire at 65, like the Midwest, or somewhere in between? Or is it not really retirement? It's an active lifestyle that's a work-life balance. That could be good too. So figure out what that looks like. And then you can build a plan on how to get there. So the how is important. One way to get the how, to get to your where, is by understanding your unique ability, your freak factor. These are two different concepts that are very similar. Your unique ability is that thing. If I ask my family and friends and my coworkers, what is that thing I do better than anybody else? They're going to say roughly the same thing. And it's a great exercise to do. I did it maybe 5-10 years ago. And then the freak factor is a little different but similar, which is when people criticize you, take those words, take the antonym, the opposite of those words, and that's probably your unique ability or your strength, and then flaunt your freak factor. It's okay to have a sense of humor, or to be super data focused, or to be very outgoing, or whatever it is. Embrace it and leverage it to build your career. Set a timeline, so set some goals, the when, right? How are you going to map out, reverse engineer from your end game, the where, and go back, maybe it's 10, 20, 30, 40 years out, and then map the major milestones back to today so you can start tracking to those. And leverage, of course, your knowledge, skills, and experience. That is the least important factor when we hire, is your knowledge, skills, and experience, because that can all be taught over time. So I care more about passion and purpose. But it's important for you to be gaining those knowledge and skills and experience, because that's what most people hire for, and certainly what you would be doing day to day. So Cameron Herold, he's written some great articles on, dreaming big, and has summarized some of these techniques himself. So here are some resources that may be helpful to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. These are all clickable. And again, anybody registered or that in chat says, please send me a copy of the presentation, we will email you a copy. And a couple days from now, we will post a version on SlideShare, and then this audio version on YouTube. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Also, a reminder to visit our Insights section on Anvil, to visit the MindShare site, sign up for the newsletter, sign up for future Lunch and Learn webinars, and the LinkedIn group as well. You can follow us at pdxMindShare and at Anvil Media and at Kent J. Lewis. So, are there any questions? Okay. So I have a question here about how do I get started on the networking side of things, because I'm not really, I don't like to go up and shake hands, and I don't really know how to reach out. So I guess I would say a good thing to do would be build your network in LinkedIn as quickly as you can. There are people that will hire based on your connection count, based on your prowess with LinkedIn, particularly in a sales and marketing role. But it's also important to get a quality level check. So when you do a connection request, always send a personal invite as to why you're reaching out to them. And hey, I'd love to take you to coffee and pick your brain about your career, or what it's like to work at your agency, that sort of thing. So I would heavily rely on LinkedIn for that, but you can also do that through social media, particularly on Twitter. Engage, follow influencers and people that you admire, and then start a dialogue with them externally or through DM, and build a rapport that way. And then lastly, there's the old school face-to-face. So attend marketing events at local trade organizations. Here in Portland, it would be American Marketing Association, Portland Ad Federation, SEM PDX, and pdxMindShare, at least virtually. You can go face-to-face and meet these folks, plan ahead of time, try and see who's there, get a sense of who's attending, and have a plan. One person I hired came up to me at an event with an envelope. It was a cover letter and a resume, and said, I've been stalking you for a while. I really want to work at Anvil, and spout off a few things that showed he did his homework. We ended up hiring him because he was so proactive. But I will recommend that there's a fine line between being proactive and persistent and being just downright sad and desperate. So know the difference. And I've seen a bit of desperation over the years at MindShare. But the folks that are positive and are checking in, always good. My other tip there is, when you follow up and check in with somebody, I haven't heard from you in a while, instead of just it's a little desperation when don't have any value when you reach out. So I always recommend adding value by simply saying, hey, I saw this article, thought you might find it interesting. Here's my thought on it, but I'd love to get your input. By the way, if you have any other updates on your end, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a better way to re-engage people. But it's okay if you'd made an ask that they agreed to, like you meet with somebody and you say, is there anybody else I should meet? And they name 3 names. You always follow up and say, I thank you for that, for you agreeing to introduce me. Is there anything else I can do? Just a tip for me, from me is that make the executive's life easier by, if you're asking me to make an introduction, send me an email like, thanks for making me an introduction to so-and-so. Here's a little bit about me, and that way I can just forward that along to them with a couple good words. It takes me 2 seconds, but you get the introduction and you get to do it in your voice. That's another tip. Any other questions? Okay. All right, so we're coming down against time here, so we will wrap up. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, and hopefully these between 5 and 30 tips will help you turn that internship into a full-time career in marketing or whatever discipline you like. Thank you so much for the time, and we'll catch you next month at our next webinar.